I needed to protect us, even if it meant lying to you.
Why didn't you trust me?
The meeting is concluded.
Not yet.
We have the agreement. The truth is in these records, Richard.
We have everything.
This can't be.
No one that quiet is harmless, and Dominic Hayes learned that too late. I was standing 12 feet from him when he dismissed 3 executives without raising his voice. The conference room sat on the 62nd floor of Hayes Tower, wrapped in glass and rain, high above downtown Chicago, where traffic lights blinked like warning signs through the storm. Men with 7-figure salaries stared down at the polished table as if it might save them. One woman kept twisting her wedding ring. Another man tried to explain a missing signature, then stopped when Dominic looked at him. That was the thing about Dominic Hayes. He did not need volume. He did not need threats. Silence did the work for him. I had been his executive assistant for 8 months, 11 days, and 4 hours, though no one knew I counted time that carefully. I stood beside the credenza with my tablet in one hand and a folder in the other, wearing the same white blouse, black skirt, and low heels that made me forgettable enough to survive. My hair was pinned back. My face was calm. My breathing was even. I had practiced all of it for years. Dominic closed the file in front of him. The sound was soft, but every person in the room flinched except me. "You had one job," he said. "Protect the contract before it reached my desk." No one answered. Outside, thunder rolled across the windows, deep and distant, like the city itself was clearing its throat. I stepped forward before he could turn. "The corrected contract is here, Mr. Hayes." I placed the folder by his right hand, exactly where he would reach next. His fingers stopped half an inch from the table. For the first time that morning, his attention shifted away from them and landed on me. Not quickly, not casually. He looked at me the way he looked at numbers that did not add up. "I didn't ask for that yet," he said. "No," I replied. "But you were about to." The room went still in a different way. The executives were afraid of being fired. I was afraid of being seen. There is a difference. Fear of losing a job makes people sweat. Fear of losing a secret makes the whole body become quiet. Dominic opened the folder. His dark suit looked almost black, under the cold ceiling lights. His face gave away nothing, but I saw the small change in his jaw when he reached page 3. He had found the clause I marked. The hidden transfer language. The one Richard Hayes's office tried to bury under legal polish and expensive lies. Dominic read it once, then again. Who flagged this? I did. Legal missed it. Yes. Finance missed it. Yes. His eyes lifted. They were gray, not blue, not green, but storm-colored, the kind of eyes that made people confess things they had not done. And my assistant caught it. I held his stare because looking away would have been worse. "Your assistant reads everything before you sign it." Someone at the table gave a nervous laugh. Dominic did not. He leaned back slowly, watching me as if I had just stepped out of a shadow he had mistaken for furniture. That was how I had survived inside his world. I had made myself useful, precise, invisible. I knew when he drank coffee and when he only held the cup to make others wait. I knew which calls he ignored twice before answering. I knew which names made his men lower their voices. And I knew better than to react when Richard Hayes's name appeared on a calendar invite, even though my pulse had stumbled for half a second. Half a second was all it took. Dominic saw it. He saw everything. Almost everything. He did not see the old silver fountain pen in my drawer. He did not see the name I was born with hidden under the name printed on my badge. He did not see my mother's warning folded into the lining of my purse like a prayer. Not yet. The meeting ended 3 minutes later. The executives left pale and silent, carrying their ruined confidence in leather briefcases. I gathered the papers, stacked the glasses, and moved through the room like weather. Quiet. Expected. Easy to ignore. But when I reached for the marked contract, Dominic's hand covered the edge of the folder before I could take it. He did not touch me. He only stopped the paper from leaving. "Claire," he said. My name sounded different in his mouth. Less like an instruction. More like a question. I looked at him. "Yes, Mr. Hayes?" Rain slid down the glass behind him, turning the skyline into something blurred and breakable. He studied my face for a long moment. Then he said the words I had spent 8 months trying to avoid. No one that quiet catches something that dangerous by accident. I smiled because that was what harmless women did when powerful men came too close to the truth. Then it's fortunate I pay attention. His expression did not change, but the air did. And for the first time since I walked into Hayes Tower, Dominic Hayes looked at me like I was not his assistant. He looked at me like I was a locked door. By noon, the entire 62nd floor knew Dominic Hayes had started watching me. No one said it out loud. People in Hayes Tower survived by pretending not to notice things. They noticed anyway. The receptionist stopped gossiping when I passed. The junior analysts lowered their voices near my desk. Even Martin from security looked at my badge twice before letting me through the private elevator, as if my name had changed overnight. It had not. Claire Bennett still sat in black letters beneath my photograph. 27 years old. Executive office. Authorized access. Such a clean little lie. I kept my face calm and my hands busy. Calendar updates. Travel confirmations. Expense approvals. A lunch reservation Dominic would cancel because he hated restaurants where people watched him eat. I moved through every task with the precision of someone who had nowhere else to go and no one waiting at home. That was the story I had built. No family photographs on my desk. No birthday cards. No flowers. No personal calls except the occasional automated reminder from my dentist in Oak Park. I kept one spare cardigan in the bottom drawer, one pair of flats under my desk, and one sealed envelope taped beneath the lowest file cabinet where no cleaning crew would ever reach. A woman without a past is not invisible because she is empty. She is invisible because she has removed every handle the world could use to pull her open. At 12:48, Dominic's office door opened. The conversations around me thinned into silence. He stepped out with his jacket off, shirt sleeves buttoned at the wrists, phone in one hand, expression unreadable. He did not look angry. That made people more nervous. Anger gave them something to measure. Calm gave them nothing. Claire, he said. I stood before the second syllable settled. Yes, Mr. Hayes. Move the Cresswell call to 3 o'clock. Cancel the charity board briefing. Send the revised contract to my private counsel only. Not legal. Already done. His eyes paused on me. Of course it is. I handed him a new schedule before he asked for it. His thumb brushed the paper edge, not my fingers, but close enough that I felt the old instinct wake inside me. Step back. Lower your eyes. Give nothing away. I did none of those things. I simply waited. He looked down at the schedule. Why is Richard on my calendar tonight? The name landed between us like a glass cracking in a quiet room. Richard Hayes. I had seen it at 7:16 that morning when his office sent the request. I had read the subject line 3 times. Private family matter. Mandatory attendance. My first thought had not been about Dominic. It had been about my mother's voice, thin and tired through a locked bathroom door, telling me never to trust a Hayes man who smiled before asking a question. I kept my breathing even. I had practiced that too. His office requested a 7 o'clock meeting in the private dining room. Dominic watched me instead of the paper. And you accepted it. You have declined his last 4 requests. That was not my question. The floor seemed colder beneath my shoes. Behind him, Chicago spread out in gray glass and wet streets. Ordinary people living ordinary lives 50 stories below a secret they would never see. I folded my hands around the tablet. He marked it urgent. Richard marks everything urgent when he wants to be obeyed. Then perhaps tonight he wants to be feared. For 1 second, I heard myself. Too sharp. Too familiar. Too close to the truth. Dominic heard it too. His gaze narrowed, not with anger, but recognition. I lowered my eyes to the calendar, because looking calm is easier when you stop looking at the man who is beginning to count your silences. Would you like me to cancel it? I asked. He did not answer right away. The office lights hummed above us. Someone's printer started near accounting and stopped immediately, as if even the machine had become uncertain. No, Dominic said at last. Leave it. I nodded once. Anything else? He leaned closer by half a step, still careful, still controlled, still far enough away to call it professional. How long have you worked for me, Claire? 8 months. And before that, Pierce Administrative Group. Before that, my fingers tightened around the tablet. Not enough for anyone else to see. Enough for him. Several temporary placements. That is a very neat answer. I try to keep my resume readable. Something almost like a smile touched his mouth, but never reached his eyes. Readable is not the same as true. I met his stare then. I had to. A lie told from fear sounds different than a lie told for survival, and I needed him to hear neither. Most employers prefer simple histories. Dominic studied me for a long moment. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and the room released a breath it had been holding. 7 o'clock, he said. You will stay late. Yes, Mr. Hayes. He turned back toward his office, then stopped with one hand on the door. Claire. I looked up. Yes. When Richard arrives, do not leave the floor. My pulse moved before I could stop it. Only once. A small betrayal under my skin. Dominic saw it. And in that moment, I understood the most dangerous thing about him was not that he noticed fear. It was that he noticed when fear had a name. At 6:31, the rain came back harder, turning the windows of Hayes Tower into long sheets of silver. Most of the staff had already gone home, or pretended to, leaving the 62nd floor with that strange after-hours stillness that made every small sound feel too honest. The elevator chimed now and then from lower floors. The air system breathed above the ceiling. Somewhere inside Dominic's office, a clock ticked with patient cruelty towards 7 o'clock. I sat at my desk outside his door, reviewing the private dining room seating chart for the third time, even though there were only 4 names on it. Dominic Hayes, Richard Hayes, Arthur Bell, the family attorney. Me, not at the table, of course, but close enough to take notes, close enough to hear whatever Richard wanted him to hear, close enough to make every old warning in my body wake up. I should have used the company pen. I had a drawer full of them, black plastic, gold lettering, easy to lose, easier to replace. Instead, my hand reached for the silver fountain pen before my mind could stop it. Habit is dangerous. Memory is worse. The pen felt cool between my fingers, heavier than it looked, the metal worn smooth where my mother's thumb had rested years before mine. I used it only when I was tired or frightened, or too close to forgetting who I had been before Claire Bennett became my name. The ink moved across the paper in a dark blue line as I corrected one word in the agenda. Indemnity. Richard had always loved words that sounded harmless while hiding something sharp underneath. I was blotting the ink when Dominic's office door opened without warning. I did not jump. I had trained myself out of sudden movement a long time ago, but my hand closed around the pen too fast. His eyes dropped to it immediately. That was the problem with men like Dominic. They did not look where you wanted them to look. They looked where you tried to hide. He stepped closer, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable. The storm painted pale streaks of light across his face. You still use a fountain pen, he said. For handwritten notes. That is unusual. So is reading contracts before signing them. He almost smiled. Almost. Then his gaze fixed on the cap of the pen, and whatever had been human in his expression went still. I knew what he had seen before he said a word. The mark was small, nearly faded from years of touch. A tiny bird with one wing lowered, etched into the silver near the clip. To anyone else, it was decoration. To my mother, it had been a promise. To the Hayes family, it was supposed to be buried with the past. Dominic reached out, then stopped himself before his fingers touched it. That restraint scared me more than if he had taken it. Where did you get that? His voice was quiet. Too quiet. The floor beneath me felt suddenly thin, as if 62 stories of steel and stone could not hold the weight of one question. I placed the agenda down carefully. It is mine. That is not what I asked. I looked at the pen, then at him. The lie I had prepared years ago rose smoothly, practiced, and polished. I found it in a second-hand shop in Milwaukee. Dominic's eyes did not move from my face. You are lying. My pulse struck once, hard enough to feel in my throat. That is a serious accusation for office supplies. The symbol on that pen belonged to a woman my family has not spoken about in 15 years. The sound of the rain seemed to disappear. In its place came another memory. My mother at our kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug she never drank from, whispering that some names were not meant to survive daylight. I kept my voice even. Then perhaps it is not as rare as you think. Dominic leaned one hand against my desk, not close enough to trap me, close enough to make the air change. Her name was Evelyn. I forgot to breathe. Only for a second. Only long enough for him to see it. His eyes sharpened, and I hated myself for giving him that much. I had survived background checks, coded files, false references, and 8 months under the roof of the most observant man in Chicago. But one name had reached through every wall I built and found the daughter underneath. I capped the pen with slow fingers and slid it into my drawer. Your 7 o'clock meeting begins in 23 minutes. Dominic did not look toward the dining room. He kept looking at me. Who was she to you, Claire? My hand rested on the drawer handle. I could feel the sealed envelope beneath the lowest cabinet, the one no one had found yet, the one that carried my real name in my mother's handwriting. I stood, smoothing my skirt, gathering the agenda as if the room had not tilted. A stranger, I said. Dominic's face changed then, not with anger, not with certainty, but with something colder than both. Recognition. He opened his mouth to answer, but the private elevator chimed behind him. 7 o'clock had arrived early. Richard Hayes stepped onto the floor with a calm smile and a gray coat beaded with rain, and for the first time all evening, Dominic stopped watching me. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt the old truth settle behind my ribs. He had seen the pen. He had not yet seen the girl holding it. Richard Hayes entered as if the building belonged to him, not by ownership, but by habit. He was older than Dominic by nearly 20 years, with silver hair combed back from a face that had learned kindness as a performance. His coat was still wet from the rain, but his smile was dry, polished, patient. 2 men followed him from the elevator, both carrying leather folders, both careful not to look directly at me. That was how I knew Richard had taught them well. Men like him did not need people to fear loudly. He preferred obedience, so quiet it looked like manners. Dominic stepped away from my desk, but not before his eyes moved once toward the drawer where I had hidden the pen. I felt that glance like a hand on a locked door. Then he turned to Richard. You are early. Richard removed his gloves 1 finger at a time. Family should never be kept waiting. His gaze drifted to me, soft and almost amused. Miss Bennet, still here after hours. Dominic always did have a talent for finding loyal women. The words were harmless. The tone was not. I held the agenda against my chest and gave him the professional smile I kept for men who mistook politeness for weakness. Good evening, Mr. Hayes. For a second, his expression shifted. Not enough for anyone else. Enough for me. Recognition did not arrive on his face. Something worse did. Curiosity. Dominic noticed. Of course he noticed. Claire will be taking notes. Richard looked back at him. For a private family conversation? For a business conversation? The air tightened. The private dining room waited behind frosted glass, lit with low amber lamps and set for 3 at a long walnut table. I moved ahead of them, opened the door, placed the folders at each seat, and took my position at the side console with my tablet. My face stayed calm. My heart did not. Richard sat across from Dominic and folded his hands. Arthur Bell, the attorney, settled between them with the tired expression of a man paid very well to hear dangerous things. Described in gentle language. The first 10 minutes were ordinary. Numbers. Property transfers. A shipping subsidiary in Baltimore. A charity fund Richard wanted moved before the end of the quarter. I typed every word. I knew which phrases mattered and which ones were smoke. My mother had taught me that before I knew long division. Watch the verbs. Clara, she used to say. Men hide sins in passive voice. The name moved through me like a struck match. Clara. I had not let anyone call me that in 15 years. Then Richard opened a blue folder and slid 1 page toward Dominic. This requires your signature tonight. Dominic did not touch it. I was told this meeting was urgent, not rushed. Richard smiled. Those are often the same thing. I looked at the document from where I stood. Only a corner. Only 3 visible lines. It was enough. The language was cleaner than the contract from that morning, but the shape was the same. A transfer hidden inside a protection clause. A door dressed as a wall. My fingers stopped over the tablet. Half a second. Too long. Dominic turned his head slightly, not toward the document, toward me. He had seen the pause. Richard had too. Something wrong, Miss Bennet? Richard asked gently. I looked up. No, sir. You stopped typing. I was confirming the spelling of the subsidiary. His smile widened. Efficient. Dominic leaned back in his chair. Claire does not stop for spelling. The sentence fell softly, but everyone heard the warning inside it. I kept my eyes on the tablet. Richard studied me now, really studied me, and I felt the years between us collapse. A kitchen in Milwaukee. My mother burning papers in a sink. A suitcase by the door. Her hand closing around mine as she said, If he ever looks at you like he remembers someone, you run. I did not run. Running is sometimes the loudest confession. Dominic picked up the page at last, read it once, then set it down. No, Richard's smile faded by a fraction. No, I am not signing it. You have not heard the full explanation. I heard enough. Silence opened across the table. Arthur Bell adjusted his glasses and suddenly became very interested in his pen. Richard turned the page back toward himself with careful fingers. Your father trusted my judgment. Dominic's voice lowered. My father trusted many things that cost him. For the first time, Richard stopped smiling completely. I looked down too late. The old instinct had betrayed me again. Relief. Small. Brief. Visible. Dominic saw it. Richard saw Dominic seeing it. And in that narrow triangle of attention, I understood my first lie had failed. Not because Dominic knew the truth. Because he now knew there was a truth to find. When the meeting ended, Richard buttoned his coat slowly and walked past my desk without looking at the drawer. That frightened me more than if he had. At the elevator, he turned back. Good night, Miss Bennett. I said nothing until the doors closed. Then Dominic spoke behind me. You knew that document was bad before I touched it. I faced him with my calmest expression. I read quickly. He stepped closer, still leaving space. Always leaving just enough space to make his control look like patience. No. You remembered quickly. The rain tapped against the glass. My pulse answered beneath my skin. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to reach for another neat little lie. But Dominic was watching me now with the terrible focus of a man who had mistaken silence for emptiness and just discovered it had walls. Go home, Claire, he said. I blinked. I thought you wanted me to stay. I do. His eyes moved once to the drawer. That is why you should leave before I asked the wrong question. I gathered my coat, my purse, my ordinary name, and walked toward the elevator without looking back. But I knew, before the doors closed, that Dominic Hayes had not let me go. He had only given himself the night to decide how carefully he would follow. The next morning, Hayes Tower smelled like rainwater, coffee, and polished stone. I arrived at 6:45, 15 minutes earlier than usual, because fear makes some people hide and makes others prepare. I was the second kind because my mother had raised me that way. The lobby was almost empty, its marble floor reflecting the gray light that slipped through the revolving doors. Martin at security looked up from his desk and hesitated before waving me through. That hesitation told me Dominic had already asked questions. Not loudly, not officially. Men like Dominic did not need to announce an investigation. They only changed the temperature of a room and waited for people to shiver. I rode the private elevator alone, watching the numbers climb in clean white light. 38, 49, 56, 62. My reflection stared back from the mirrored wall. Pale face, pinned hair, calm mouth, borrowed name. Claire Bennett looked dependable. Claire Bennett looked ordinary. Claire Bennett looked like someone who had never packed her childhood into a grocery bag at 3 in the morning while her mother whispered, "Do not cry until we are moving." The doors opened to silence. My desk lamp was already on. That was wrong. I never left it on. I stepped closer and saw the envelope on my keyboard. Heavy cream paper. No logo. No signature. Just 2 words written in black ink. Private archive. I did not touch it at first. Touching things is how the past proves you were there. Then Dominic's office door opened. He stood inside with his jacket over one arm and his expression carved from sleeplessness. You are early, he said. So are you. I did not leave. That stopped me. His shirt was still the same white one from the night before, sleeves rolled once at the forearms, tie gone, eyes sharper than they should have been after a night without rest. On his desk sat 3 open boxes of old files, each labeled with dates from 15 years ago. My throat tightened. That is not a good habit, Mr. Hayes. Neither is lying well. I looked at the envelope again. What is this? A floor you have never been authorized to enter. Then why is it on my desk? Because I want to know what you recognize before you decide what to hide. There it was. Not an accusation. An invitation with teeth. I should have refused. I should have called in sick. I should have walked out of that tower and never looked back. Instead, I picked up the envelope and followed him into the private elevator. He pressed a black keycard against the panel. A button lit below the parking garage levels. The elevator dropped. 62. Stories of glass and money disappeared above us, replaced by concrete, humming wires, and the kind of cold air buildings keep for secrets. Dominic stood beside me without speaking. He did not crowd me. He did not touch me. That almost made it harder to hate him. Is this where you keep the truth? I asked. Or where your family keeps what it calls truth? He looked at the closed doors. I am starting to think there is a difference. The elevator opened into a narrow hallway lined with steel doors and motion lights that woke one by one as we walked. At the end stood a room with no windows. Dominic unlocked it with his thumbprint, then stepped aside, so I entered first. Shelves filled the walls from floor to ceiling. File boxes, security tapes, ledgers, photographs sealed in plastic. The air smelled like dust and old paper, dry as a confession left too long unopened. On the center table sat one box already pulled down. The label read Whitmore Incident, March 16th. My knees almost forgot their purpose. Dominic watched me. I hated him for being kind enough not to pretend he had not seen it. Claire, he said softly. I moved to the table because standing still would have broken me. The first folder held property reports. The second held insurance forms. The third held photographs from a small house in Milwaukee after a fire that the official report had called accidental. I knew that porch. I knew the cracked front step. I knew the kitchen window where my mother grew basil in coffee cans because real planters cost too much. Then Dominic turned over one photograph and pushed it toward me with 2 fingers. A woman stood outside Hayes Tower 15 years earlier, younger than I remembered, her brown hair pinned back, a silver fountain pen clipped to her coat. My mother, Evelyn Whitmore. The room blurred at the edges, but I did not let my tears fall. Tears give men maps. Dominic's voice came from across the table, low and careful. You knew her. I placed my hand flat on the cold metal table until my body remembered how to obey me. Everyone knows someone, Mr. Hayes. Not like this. I looked at the photograph, at the woman who had taught me how to vanish and left me. The one thing that made me visible. Then maybe you should ask why your family kept her in a locked room instead of a memory. Dominic did not answer. For the first time since I met him, the silence did not belong to him. It belonged to me. My mother had another name before she became a warning. Evelyn Whitmore was not the frightened woman my memory tried to preserve. She was precise, elegant in a quiet way, the kind of woman who balanced a checkbook with a grocery receipt tucked under her elbow and still remembered which neighbor needed soup on Sunday. She wore cardigans with pearl buttons, kept her brown hair pinned at the nape of her neck, and told me numbers were only dangerous when powerful men believed no one was counting them. I was 12 when I first saw her cry over a ledger. Not loudly. Never loudly. She sat at our kitchen table in Milwaukee after midnight, a single lamp burning beside her, the silver fountain pen moving through columns of names I was not allowed to read. I stood in the hallway wearing socks with little yellow stars on them, holding a glass of water I had forgotten to drink. Go back to bed, Clara, she said without turning around. Clara. My real name sounded strange inside the archive room, even though no one had spoken it. I stared at the photograph of her on Dominic's table and felt 15 years fold in on themselves. Back then, I thought secrets were things adults kept because children were too young to understand. I know better now. Secrets are sometimes the only shelter a parent can build when the storm has already found the house. She worked for my family, Dominic said. His voice was controlled, but something in it had shifted. Less command, more caution. I did not look at him. She worked near your family. There is a difference. There was to her. He let that sit between us. The lights in the archive hummed softly above our heads. I turned the photograph over. On the back, someone had written Evelyn Whitmore, external accounting consultant, temporary review. Temporary. As if my mother had been a form, a task, a woman meant to pass through unnoticed. I almost laughed. My mother noticed everything. She noticed when the mail carrier changed routes. She noticed when the same black sedan appeared twice on our block in 1 week. She noticed when I started hiding library books under my pillow because stories felt safer than real life. And on March 16th, she noticed me standing in the doorway with my school backpack while she packed our birth certificates into a brown envelope. We are visiting Aunt Marlene, she told me. We did not have an Aunt Marlene. I knew that. She knew I knew. Still, I nodded because children learn early when truth is too heavy for a kitchen. She gave me the fountain pen that night. She pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers around it. If anything happens, you do not tell people what you feel. You watch what they do. Mom, you are scaring me. Her face changed then, not because she wanted to frighten me, but because she had run out of softer lies. Listen to me, Clara. If a Hayes man ever finds you, make sure it is the right one. I did not ask what that meant. I wish I had. By morning, our house smelled like smoke from the papers she had burned in the sink. My mother was gone, and a woman I had never met drove me west with a new folder on my lap. The folder said Claire Bennett. I said the name out loud for the first time in a gas station bathroom outside Madison, while fluorescent lights flickered above me and my childhood ended between two cracked mirrors. Claire Bennett had no mother. Claire Bennett had clean records. Claire Bennett learned to smile only when necessary and cry only in rooms with locked doors. I became so good at disappearing that people called it professionalism. In the archive, Dominic opened another folder, then stopped when he saw my face. Claire, he said, but for the first time, the name sounded borrowed. I looked at him then. Really looked. Not at the boss. Not at the Hayes heir. At the boy my mother had once warned me might exist beneath the name. She did not disappear because she was guilty, I said. She disappeared because she found something your family wanted forgotten. Dominic's hand rested on the edge of the folder. And you came here to find it. I reached into my purse and touched the lining. Where my mother's final note still lived, thin as a scar. No, I said softly. I came here to find out whether you were the wrong Hayes man. His expression did not break. But the silence did. Dominic did not ask another question in the archive. That was how I knew my answer had reached him. Men who only want control fill silence with demands. Men who have been wounded by truth learn, for one careful second, to stand still. He closed the Whitmore box with both hands, slow enough that the sound did not startle me, then carried it himself instead of calling one of his men. We rode back up in the private elevator without speaking. The numbers rose above us like a countdown in reverse. Basement, parking, lobby, 32, 47, 62. My reflection stood beside his in the mirrored wall. He was taller, darker in his tailored suit, built from money and command. I looked like the kind of woman people trusted to schedule flights and remember birthdays. That almost made me laugh. I had forgotten my own birthday twice because Claire Bennett was not born. She was assigned. When the elevator doors opened, the office floor had changed. 2 security men stood near the reception area. Martin was gone from the lobby feed on the wall monitor, replaced by a silent black screen. My desk looked untouched, but I knew better. The left drawer sat 1 inch too far open. My coffee mug had been turned with the handle facing east instead of west. Someone had searched quickly and tried to be respectful. That meant Dominic had ordered it. Or Richard had. Both possibilities felt like cold water down my spine. I walked to the desk and opened the drawer. The fountain pen was gone. For one breath, the world narrowed to the empty tray where it should have been. Then Dominic saw my face. I did not take it, he said. I believed him, and that frightened me more. Someone did. Yes. His voice lowered. He turned toward the security men without raising it. Locked down internal access logs from 6 o'clock last night until now. No one enters or leaves this floor without my approval. One of them nodded and moved fast. No panic. No questions. Dominic's people obeyed him the way machines obeyed switches. I envied that for a moment. My life had never obeyed anything. Claire. He said my name again, still using the borrowed version, but carefully now, like he knew it had edges. Come into my office. You searched my desk. I had your employment history reviewed. That is not an answer. No, he said. It is the beginning of one. I followed him inside, not because he ordered me, but because the pen was missing and my mother's past had just changed hands. His office looked different in daylight. Less like a throne room. More like a room where one man had failed to sleep. The old files still covered his desk. Beside them sat a report, thick, clipped, and marked confidential. My name was on the first page. Claire and Bennett. Born in Springfield, Illinois. High school in Naperville. Administrative certification. Pierce Administrative Group. Temporary assignments. Clean references. Clean taxes. Clean apartment lease. Clean enough to bleach out blood from memory, if memory could be cleaned. Dominic placed the file between us. Your life is perfect on paper. Most companies prefer that. No life is this perfect. I said nothing. He opened to the second page. Your social security record begins at 12. Many children do not have consistent records. Your school transfer documents were filed by a woman who does not exist. My hand stayed folded. My pulse did not. That sounds like a clerical issue. Your first apartment was leased by a nonprofit that closed the same week it opened. Your references answer questions, but never volunteer details. Your previous employer said you were efficient, private, and impossible to remember clearly. He looked up. That is not a resume. That is training. The word hit harder than I expected. Training. Not survival. Not fear. Not childhood shaped by closed curtains and bus tickets paid in cash. Training made it sound chosen. I looked toward the windows where Chicago moved under a dull morning sky. Thousands of lives crossing without knowing one hidden name had gone missing from a desk drawer. You think I was sent here to hurt you? Dominic's jaw tightened. I think you were sent here with a purpose. There is a difference. I am trying to find it. I turned back to him. Then try harder. For the first time, surprise touched his face. Not anger. Not offense. Surprise that I had spoken to him like a man, not a myth. I stepped closer to the desk and placed one finger on the file that contained the clean little ghost of Claire Bennett. You want to know why I read every document before you sign it? Why I noticed Richard's language? Why I stayed invisible in a building full of men who sell attention like currency? My voice stayed soft. That was where my power lived. Because I knew your uncle would eventually try to use your own name against you. Dominic did not move. And why protect me if you came here to expose my family? The question was not cold. That made it dangerous. Cold questions can be dodged. Honest ones find the bruise. I thought of my mother's pen, gone from the drawer. I thought of the photograph in the archive, her face younger than my grief had allowed. I thought of the boy Dominic must have been before the Hayes name taught him to turn every room into a test. Because I needed to know whether there was anything left in you worth protecting, I said. The office went silent. Not empty. Full. Dominic looked at me then, not like an assistant, not like a suspect, but like a locked door had just spoken from the other side. Power is loud when it is insecure. Real power waits until everyone else has finished talking. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Dominic had called an emergency board meeting in the glass conference room, and Richard arrived with the calm face of a man who had already counted the votes. I stood at the side wall with my tablet against my chest, no longer pretending to be invisible. That was the strange part. Once a man like Dominic noticed you, everyone else started pretending they had seen you all along. The board members avoided my eyes. Arthur Bell kept cleaning the same pair of glasses. Richard sat across from Dominic with his silver hair smooth, his cuff links aligned, and my mother's fountain pen clipped neatly inside his breast pocket. I saw at the moment he took off his coat. The tiny bird with the lowered wing caught the light for half a second, and my body went cold from the inside out. He wanted me to see it. He wanted me to react. He had stolen a memory and turned it into bait. I kept breathing. In through the nose. Hold for 2. Out through the mouth. My mother had taught me that too, though she had called it counting inventory, because a child is less frightened of numbers than fear. Dominic saw the pen after I did. His eyes moved from Richard's pocket to my face, and for once I let him read the truth there. Not panic. Not weakness. Recognition. Richard opened the meeting with a report about risk exposure, legacy obligations, and family continuity. Beautiful phrases. Empty rooms with expensive wallpaper. He passed printed packets around the table, each one stamped urgent in red at the top. Dominic has allowed personal hesitation to slow a necessary restructuring, Richard said, his voice smooth enough to make accusations sound like concern. This vote protects the Hayes name. Dominic leaned back. The Hayes name has survived worse than careful reading. A few board members shifted. Richard smiled. Careful reading is useful. Paralysis is not. Then he turned to me. Miss Bennett, would you be kind enough to distribute the signature pages? The room became very still. He was not asking for help. He was placing me inside the trap. If I obeyed, Dominic signed the transfer structure Richard wanted. If I refused, I became the assistant with a hidden agenda, the woman with no real past and too much interest in family affairs. My fingers closed around the folder I had carried in from Dominic's office. The second folder, the one I had prepared before anyone knew I knew where the real danger sat. I walked around the table slowly, the soft sound of my heels against marble filling the silence. I placed Richard's signature pages in front of each member. Then I placed another packet in front of Dominic. Not thick. 7 pages. Plain white. No red stamp. No drama. Richard's eyes sharpened. That document was not on the agenda. I looked at him, then at the board. Neither was fraud. Arthur Bell stopped cleaning his glasses. Someone at the far end of the table coughed once and went quiet. Dominic did not touch the packet yet. He watched me, and for the first time, he did not look like he was trying to decide whether I was dangerous. He looked like he was deciding whether to trust me in front of witnesses. Richard laughed softly. Careful, Miss Bennett. Big words can damage small careers. I moved to the wall again. Then it is fortunate I do not have a career worth protecting. Dominic picked up the packet. Page 1 was a copy of Richard's proposed restructuring clause. Page 2 was the subsidiary chain. Page 3 was the transfer path. Page 4 was the offshore advisory agreement. Page 5 tied the signatures to a shell trust in Delaware. Page 6 named the beneficiary account. And page 7 was my mother's handwriting, copied from a ledger Richard thought had disappeared 15 years ago. Dominic reached page 7 and went completely still. The room felt smaller. Richard's smile did not fade all at once. It cracked by degrees, as if something behind it had finally heard the truth knocking. "Where did you get this?" he asked. He was looking at me now, not as an assistant, not as furniture, but as the daughter of a woman he had failed to erase. I kept my voice low because quiet things travel farther in frightened rooms. "From the person you underestimated first." Dominic set the packet down. His hand rested on page 7, covering part of my mother's script as if protecting it from the air itself. "This meeting is over," he said. No one moved. Richard stood slowly, his expression polished again, but his eyes had lost their softness. "You are making a mistake." Dominic looked at him, then at me. "No. I made it when I thought silence meant loyalty." The fountain pen still sat in Richard's pocket, silver and stolen, but for the first time, it no longer looked like proof that he owned the past. It looked like proof that he had touched something sacred without understanding its weight. The boardroom emptied slowly, not because anyone wanted to stay, but because no one wanted to be the first person seen leaving Richard Hayes behind. Chairs moved back with soft scrapes against the marble floor. Folders closed. Phones disappeared into jacket pockets. Arthur Bell gathered the 7 pages with hands that were steadier than his face and asked Dominic if he wanted legal review to begin immediately. Dominic only said, "Private counsel. No internal channels." That was when everyone understood the wall had cracked from the inside. Richard remained standing near the far end of the table, my mother's fountain pen still clipped inside his pocket. His smile returned, but thinner now, like paper held too close to a flame. He looked at Dominic first, then at me. "You trust a secretary with a ghost story over blood." Dominic did not blink. "I trust evidence." Richard gave a quiet laugh. "Evidence can be arranged. So can family history." The words landed cleanly. Richard's face did not change, but his hand touched the pen. One brief movement. Possessive. Careless. I felt something inside me go very still. My mother had carried that pen through fear, through trains and rented rooms and names that had to be burned before sunrise. Richard wore it like an accessory. Dominic saw my eyes move to it. This time, he understood before I spoke. "Return what is not yours," he said. Richard tilted his head. "This?" He slipped the pen from his pocket and turned it between 2 fingers. "A sentimental object, apparently. I found it on the assistant's desk. One could argue it was abandoned." My voice came out softer than I expected. My mother never abandoned anything she meant to protect. For the first time, Richard's attention sharpened into something real. "Your mother," he repeated. There was no warmth in it, only calculation. Dominic stepped once toward him. Not threatening, not hurried, just enough to make the room remember who owned the air. Richard placed the pen on the table. The silver made a small sound against the wood. I did not move until he walked out. The elevator doors closed behind him with a whisper, and only then did my legs remember they had been holding me up for too long. I reached for the pen. My fingers closed around it, and the past came back in fragments. My mother's thumbprint in blue ink. A kitchen lamp. A bus ticket to Madison. Her voice telling me that ledgers were not books. They were. Maps of what men feared losing. Dominic stood across from me, quiet in a way I had never heard from him before. "There is more," he said. It was not a question. I looked down at the 7 pages. "Yes." We moved to his office without another word. The city outside had turned pale and wet under the late afternoon sky. Dominic closed the door, but he did not lock it. I noticed that. I noticed everything. On his desk, I placed the copy of page 7 beside the fountain pen. Then I opened the hidden seam in my purse and pulled out the folded sheet I had carried for years, sealed in clear plastic. thin from being touched too many nights when I needed proof that I had not invented my mother. "This is the key," I said. Dominic came closer, stopping on the other side of the desk. "To the ledger?" "To the language. My mother did not write names as names. She wrote them as debts, dates, weather reports, charitable donations, harmless things people stopped reading because they looked ordinary." He studied the page. "And you decoded it." "Not all of it." "Enough." My throat tightened, but I kept going. "Enough to know Richard moved assets through shell trusts for years. Enough to know he used your signature 3 times when you were not in the country. Enough to know the restructuring today would have made you responsible for everything he had hidden." Dominic looked at me then, and for the first time since I had known him, power did not make him look larger. Pain made him look human. "Why did you not tell me sooner?" I almost smiled. Not because anything was funny, but because the question was so simple it hurt. "You were a Hayes man. And now?" I touched the fountain pen with one finger. "Now I am still deciding." His jaw tightened, but he accepted it. That mattered more than an apology would have. "Claire," he said. "Clara." I corrected before I could stop myself. The name entered the room like a window opening in winter. Dominic's eyes changed. Not with victory, not with surprise, with respect. He nodded once. "Clara." I had spent 15 years afraid that hearing my real name from a Hayes man would feel like being found. Instead, it felt like being seen without being claimed. I looked at the ledger key, then at the man my mother had sent me to judge. "I was not afraid of you," I said. "I was afraid you would become like them." Dominic lowered his gaze to the evidence on his desk, to the handwriting of a woman his family had tried to turn into a footnote. When he spoke, his voice was quiet enough to be dangerous only to himself. "Then I need to know what she saw in me that I have not found yet." The office became too quiet after my real name entered it. "Clara." It rested between us on Dominic's desk beside my mother's pen and the ledger key, small enough to fit inside a single breath, heavy enough to change the shape of the room. For 15 years, I had believed names were doors. Claire Bennett opened elevators, signed employment forms, answered phones, and passed background checks. Clara Whitmore carried a burned house, a vanished mother, and a warning stitched into her bones. Dominic did not ask me to explain the difference. He simply stood there, looking at the evidence, as if every page had taken something from him and given him something worse in return. Truth. His phone buzzed once. Then again. He ignored it until the third vibration. When he looked at the screen, the last color left his face. "Security found a transfer request from your terminal," he said. I already knew before he turned the phone toward me. Richard had moved faster than grief, faster than trust. On the screen was a company alert showing my employee credentials attached to an unauthorized access attempt in the private archive, followed by a flagged external file transfer. My name, my badge, my desk. A perfect little frame built out of borrowed facts. I looked at the timestamp. 2:46. You were in the boardroom. With 12 witnesses. Richard will say that makes it clever. Dominic's voice was calm, but the calm had edges now. Not aimed at me. Around me. The kind of calm a man uses when the world is asking him to become exactly what it expects. He walked to the window and looked down at Chicago, one hand resting against the glass. Below us, traffic moved through wet streets in red and white lines, ordinary and endless. My mother used to say cities forgive powerful men faster than they forgive honest women. I had not understood then. I did now. "If I stay," I said, "he will make this about me." Dominic turned. "It is already about you." "No, it is about what I carry." I folded the ledger key back into its plastic sleeve and slid it into my purse beside the fountain pen. "He wants you to choose control. Detain me. Search everything. Turn me into proof that you were betrayed by an outsider instead of threatened by your own blood." Dominic's jaw tightened at the word blood. "And what do you want me to do?" That question stopped me. Not because I did not have an answer, but because no Hayes man had ever asked my mother what she wanted. At least, none who survived in her stories as decent. I held his gaze. "Let me walk out." The words changed him. I saw it happen. The instinct first. Possession disguised as protection. Command disguised as care. The old world rising in him, familiar and ready, offering him every easy answer. Lock the floor. Take the purse. Keep the woman with the secret close enough to control. For 1 second, Dominic Hayes looked like the man everyone feared he was. Then he closed his eyes. Just once. When he opened them, Something had been decided. If you leave with that ledger key, Richard will come after your reputation first. He already has. Then your work history. Your apartment. Every identity you have used to stay safe. I know. And if I let you go, I may not be able to protect you from all of it. My throat tightened, not from fear this time. From the strange pain of being warned instead of trapped. Maybe protection is not always keeping someone where you can see them. Dominic looked at me for a long moment. Then he reached into his desk and removed a slim black access card. He placed it on the table between us. Private elevator. Parking level 3. It will take you out through the service garage. I stared at the card. You are helping me disappear. No, his voice was low. I am choosing not to own your silence. The sentence found a place in me I had not known was still waiting. I picked up the card, my fingers steady now. At the door. I paused because leaving felt too much like every night my mother had taught me to survive. But this time, someone was not chasing me into another name. Someone was holding the door open and letting me keep the one I had reclaimed. Dominic, I said. He looked up. I had never called him that before. Not in his office. Not where the walls knew hierarchy. If you choose trust tonight, it may cost you your empire. He gave the smallest smile, tired and almost human. Then maybe it was never mine. I walked out with my mother's pen, my mother's key, and my real name beating quietly beneath my ribs. Behind me, Dominic Hayes did not order anyone to stop me. That was the first time I understood the difference between a man with power and a man strong enough not to use it. I left Hayes Tower through parking level 3 while the rain softened to mist behind the concrete walls. The service garage smelled like oil, wet tires, and old electricity. My footsteps echoed too loudly, each one carrying me farther from Dominic and closer to the truth my mother had hidden inside ordinary paper. I did not go home. Home was the first place Richard would expect Claire Bennett to run, and I was finished being predictable for men who mistook records for reality. Instead, I took the blue line west, sitting near the door with my purse held against my ribs and my mother's fountain pen pressed between my fingers like a pulse. People around me lived in the small exhaustion of evening. A man in a Cubs cap slept with his chin on his chest. A nurse in blue scrubs watched rain streak across the train window. 2 college students argued softly about rent. No one knew the woman between them was carrying a secret old enough to ruin a family name. That was the mercy of cities. They let you be invisible when your heart was breaking in public. I got off near Logan Square and walked 6 blocks to a 24-hour copy shop with buzzing fluorescent lights and a clerk who barely looked up from his phone. In the back corner, beside a printer that sounded like it was losing an argument with itself, I spread my mother's final papers across a laminate table. The ledger key, the copied page 7, the old note from my purse lining, the fountain pen, for pieces of a life she had tried to leave me without leaving herself behind. My hands shook only once when I unfolded the last sheet and saw the line I had avoided for years because grief had made me cowardly in very specific ways. Clara, if you are reading this, then silence has carried you farther than I could. I sat down hard in the plastic chair. The lights hummed above me. Outside, a bus sighed against the curb and pulled away. My mother's handwriting was smaller than I remembered, careful and slanted, the letters pressed deep into the paper as if she had been afraid time might erase them. She wrote that Richard had not only hidden money, he had hidden a debt. Years before the fire, before Milwaukee, before I became Claire, Dominic Hayes had been 16 years old and trapped inside a family war he did not understand. My mother found a transfer order with his name on it. Not financial, not legal, something designed to send him away from the one person trying to keep him human. His mother, Margaret Hayes. I had seen her name only once in company archives, listed beneath a charitable foundation and a date of death so clean it felt dishonest. My mother wrote that Margaret saved me first. I read the sentence 3 times. Margaret Hayes had discovered Richard's men watching our house after Evelyn refused to alter the books. She arranged safe documents, money, and a place for a child she had never met to disappear. In return, my mother promised to protect Margaret's son if the time ever came. Not because he was innocent, because he still had a choice. My throat closed around a sound I refused to release in that bright, ugly copy shop. I had spent 15 years thinking my mother left me a weapon. I thought the ledger was revenge, proof, a blade made of ink and patience. But the last page was not a list of crimes. It was a map of mercy passed between two women who had stood too close to powerful men and still chosen to save children from becoming like them. At the bottom, beneath the final coded line, my mother had written one sentence without cipher. The right Hayes man will not ask you to disappear so he can be safe. He will let you return when you are ready to be heard. I looked at Dominic's black access card beside the papers. Then I looked at my real name on the note. Clara, not a ghost, not a witness, not a secretary with a borrowed life. A daughter carrying two mothers' promises. I gathered the papers slowly and placed the fountain pen in my coat pocket, close to my heart. For the first time since I was 12, I was not running from the Hayes family. I was walking back with the truth they had failed to bury. I returned to Hayes Tower at 8:17 that night, not through the service garage, not through the private elevator, not through any door Dominic had opened for my escape. I walked in through the main lobby beneath the chandelier that scattered white light across the marble floor like broken ice. Martin was back at security. He saw me, stood too quickly, and placed one hand near the phone. I placed Dominic's black access card on the desk between us. Tell him Clara Whitmore is here. My voice did not shake. That surprised both of us. The lobby went still in that expensive way rich buildings have, where even fear seems polished before it is allowed to show itself. Martin made the call. He listened for 3 seconds, then looked at me differently. Not like an employee, not like a problem, like a name had just stepped out of a locked file and become a person. 62nd floor, he said. The elevator ride up felt longer than it ever had. I watched my reflection in the doors and saw both women standing there. Claire Bennett in her white blouse and black coat. Clara Whitmore with her mother's pen in her pocket and two women's promises folded inside her purse. When the doors opened, every light on the executive floor was on. The glass conference room was full. Dominic sat at the head of the table. Richard stood near the windows. Arthur Bell was there. So were the board members from earlier, private counsel, 2 outside auditors, and 3 people I recognized from compliance. This time, no one pretended I was invisible. Dominic rose when he saw me. He did not smile. He did not ask where I had gone. He looked relieved in a way that hurt more than concern would have. Richard recovered first. This is becoming dramatic, he said. Former assistants usually resign by email. I walked to the table and placed my purse down gently. I am not here as your assistant. The room held its breath. I removed the papers one by one. My mother's final letter. The ledger key. The decoded transfer chain. The copy of page 7. Then I took out the silver fountain pen and placed it last, its tiny broken-winged bird facing upward beneath the conference room lights. Richard's eyes moved to it. Just once. Enough. That pen belonged to Evelyn Whitmore, I said. She was not a temporary consultant. She was the person who found the first false ledger. Arthur Bell leaned forward. Dominic stayed standing, one hand resting on the back of his chair. He was not interrupting. He was not directing. For the first time, the most powerful man in the room let my silence become speech without trying to own it. I turned to the board. 15 years ago, my mother discovered a pattern of transfers hidden inside charitable accounts and shell trusts. The same structure appeared again in the documents Mr. Richard Hayes asked Dominic to sign today. Richard gave a soft laugh. A touching story, but grief is not evidence. No, I said. But handwriting, timestamps, beneficiary records, and matching routing numbers are. I slid the folder to Arthur Bell. His face changed before he reached the 3rd page. Then I unfolded my mother's last note. There is one more thing. Evelyn did not preserve these files for revenge. She preserved them because Margaret Hayes saved my life, and because my mother believed Dominic Hayes might one day have to choose whether his family name meant power or responsibility. Dominic looked down at the table then, and I saw the boy in him for 1 second, the one 2 women had tried to protect before the world taught him to become stone. Richard's voice cut through the room, colder now. You are asking them to believe a woman who spent half her life under false names. I looked at him. No, I am asking them to read. The folder moved from hand to hand. Pages turned. Breath changed. Certainty drained from Richard's side of the table 1 quiet inch at a time. When Arthur Bell finally spoke, his voice was thin but clear. These records require immediate external review. Until then, no restructuring should proceed. Richard looked at Dominic. You would let her do this to us? Dominic answered without looking away from me. She is not doing this to us. You did. That was the moment the room turned. Not loudly, Not with shouting. Power rarely dies in thunder. Sometimes it dies in paperwork, in ink, in a woman placing the right page under the right light. I touched the fountain pen and faced Richard one last time. You taught men to fear power, I said. My mother taught me to survive it. No one spoke after that. They did not need to. For 15 years, Richard Hayes had counted on silence to protect him. He had never imagined silence could learn to count back. By midnight, Richard Hayes no longer stood near the windows. He sat at the far end of the conference table with no coat, no smile, and no one left willing to meet his eyes for longer than a second. The outside auditors had taken copies. Private counsel had sealed the originals. Arthur Bell had made 3 calls in a voice that grew steadier each time. No one shouted. No one slammed a door. That was what surprised me most. I had spent 15 years imagining the truth as something loud, something that would split the world open and leave everyone staring at the damage. Instead, it moved quietly from page to page, signature to signature, until the room understood what my mother had understood before all of us. Power was not invincible. It was only protected by people too afraid to read the fine print. Richard left under review, surrounded not by loyalty, but by procedure. That was worse for a man like him. Fear could be fought. Paper could not be charmed. When the elevator doors closed behind him, the 62nd floor seemed to exhale. Board members avoided Dominic on their way out, not because they feared him less, but because they no longer knew which version of him would remain after the night was over. I stayed by the table, gathering my mother's pages with both hands. The fountain pen lay beside them, silver under the cold. Lights, ordinary and sacred at the same time. Dominic waited until the last person left before he spoke. Clara. My real name no longer startled me. Not from him. Yes. He walked to the opposite side of the table and stopped there, leaving the length of polished walnut between us like a choice he refused to cross without permission. The company will change. I looked at the city beyond the glass. Chicago glittered in the dark, wet streets shining below like black ribbon. Companies always say that after they are caught. I am not the company. No, I said softly. But you let it teach you how to become untouchable. He accepted that without defense. That was how I knew something had changed. The old Dominic Hayes would have corrected me. This one listened as if truth cost him something, and he was willing to pay. What do you want? He asked. Not what could I offer you. Not what would make this disappear. Not what price would buy your silence. Just what do you want? For a moment, I did not know how to answer. I had wanted safety for so long that wanting anything beyond it felt almost reckless. I touched the pen. I want my mother's name restored in every record your family buried. I want the false charges attached to my credentials removed. I want every woman who worked in this building under a powerful man to know that silence is not a contract. Dominic nodded once. Done. And I am resigning. The word landed between us, clean and final. His face changed, but he did not argue. He did not reach for control. He did not say I needed protection. He only looked at me with the restraint of a man learning that care, without freedom, is only another kind of cage. Where will you go? Somewhere my name belongs to me. A faint smile touched his mouth, tired and sad and real. Clara Whitmore suits you. I looked down at the badge still clipped to my coat. Claire Bennett. Executive Office. Authorized access. I removed it slowly and placed it on the table. She kept me alive. And Clara? I picked up my mother's pen. She gets to live. We stood in silence as the storm finally broke apart outside, leaving the windows clear enough to see the first pale line of morning. Beyond the skyline, Dominic walked to the conference room door and opened it for me. Such a small gesture. Such an impossible thing from the man everyone expected to close doors and call it protection. I passed him without fear. In the hallway, he said my name once more, not to stop me, only to let me know he saw me leaving. I turned back. Your mother was right about you, I said. His eyes lifted. Was she? You still had a choice. Then I walked toward the elevator with my mother's truth in my hands and my own name steady in my chest. Dominic Hayes kept his city, but he lost the illusion that power could save him from becoming human. And I, the woman he had mistaken for silence, finally learned that survival was not the end of my story. It was only the first sentence I wrote for myself.